So let's recap the Perek Rishon. We left off last week with a question, which we have started to finish off. The Rebbe's being Mavaya, that this what it says in the Medrash, Ike Shchina B'Tachtenim Hoyso, doesn't just mean that the Ike Mokim of the Shchina was B'Tachtenim, but it means also the Ike Madrega of the Shchina was B'Tachtenim, because there's a level called Ike Shchina. What is this level called Ike Shchina? So we learned that the Rebbe brings down 3 levels of Shchina. Right, the first level of Shchina, Stam Shchina in Lashon Chazal, is referring to Malchus Datzilus, the way it becomes Atik Doilam Abriya. As we said last time, that any time you have a Stam Taya, whenever you call the Eibishter or you talk about a Sphira, without giving an address, a Stam Sphira is in Atzilus. So if you're talking about Stam Shchina, it's also in Atzilus, it's a Madrega in Atzilus, specifically Malchus Datzilus. And he brings down from the Tzemach Tzedek is Dafka Malchus, the way Malchus steps over and becomes Atik Doilam Abriya. That's Stam Shchina. Then there's the Sheirish of Shchina. The Sheirish of Shchina is the Kav. He brings down from the Mitler, but it's going on the Kav. Because the Kav is also the same idea, that it's the Madrega of Eid himself that's coming down into the Eidamus. And then the last level we learned was Ike Shchina, was the Madrega of Lifnei HaTzimtzum. Which Madrega Lifnei HaTzimtzum? So he says that, do we speak the 3 levels Lifnei HaTzimtzum? Did we discuss that? I don't remember if we discussed it. There's 3 levels in Eid and Sof Lifnei HaTzimtzum. He calls it the Etzem Ha'or and the Ispashtus Ha'or, and in the Ispashtus Gufa there's 2 levels. Then we give a moshel of the Baal Chesed, Avraham. You spoke about that? Yeah, we spoke about that. So there's 3 levels. So the last level of Eid and Sof, Lifnei HaTzimtzum, which is where the Tzimtzum was, he calls here, the Rebbe was saying in Samach Vov, and the Rebbe brings it down here, the last level, Lifnei HaTzimtzum, which is the level of Eid and Sof, which is thinking about Eilamus. It's Shaychus to Eilamus. Why is it Shaychus to Eilamus? Because that's where he is Messiah, what's going to happen. That's where he thinks about, that's where the Esesphiris Agnuzis are. That's the Oil which is going to come down into Eilamus. That level is called also B'Shem Shchina. It's Lifnei HaTzimtzum, and it can't become a mocker to Eilamus unless there's a Tzimtzum. Nevertheless, in the level of Eid and Sof itself, this is the last level which is forming the Oil which is going to come down later on into Ishtalshlus. It's the Oil HaShaykh L'Eilamus, which is a mocker to Oil Mamal. So this level he calls Ike Shchina. So that means to say that Ike Shchina is referring to the last level in Eid and Sof Lifnei HaTzimtzum. So we left off with the Kasha last time. What was the question? An obvious question. You're saying that the Ike Shchina B'Tachtenim Hoyso, that the Ike Shchina was down here. That means the Eid and Sof was down here in Olam Hazeh HaTachton. So then what was Adam Rishon's job? He was out of a job. The whole union of Adam Rishon is La'avda L'Shomra. But the Olam Hazeh is a Tachton which has no Gilui. And the whole Avodah is La'avda Zumitzvah Aseh L'Shomra Zumitzvah Leisaseh. He's supposed to be Mamshech the Eid and Sof through the Kav and be Moisef Teisvis Eiris until we get back to the whole Eid and Sof coming down into Olam Hazeh. If you're saying the Ike Shchina was already here right at the beginning of the Bria, so what was Adam Rishon's job? How is it possible that the Eid and Sof should be here in the B'Tchilas HaBria in Olam Hazeh HaTach without Torah mitzvahs? So we brought down that the Rebbe explains that it doesn't mean that the Ike Shchina, the whole Eid and Sof was down here. It means that the Olam was muchsha for the Ike Shchina. Like for example, like what does it mean Hachshara? Hachshara would be al derech moshel. If you plow a field and you plant it, so a plowed field is muchsha to grow. Mashenkin, if it's a stone field, a concrete field, there's no earth there, you can put seeds on the ground, but nothing's going to grow. It's not muchsha for growing. It's not made for growing. If you plow the field and then put in seeds, then it's muchsha to grow. It's possible to grow. So Olam Hazeh was muchsha to grow Gilui Elokus. Why was it muchsha to grow Gilui Elokus? So the Rebbe explained, I think we spoke about this by Lichas last week, that the Nis'ava Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu was nimshach in the Bria. When the Eibishter was Nis'ava Dira B'Tachtenim, it wasn't that he kept a secret to himself, that he's Nis'ava, that there should be a Dira B'Tachtenim. The Nis'ava Shabbat Musay was nimshach in Seder Ishtalshlus into the Bria. It came with and became part and parcel of the Olam Hazeh. And by doing so, by the fact that the Nisava is also within the Bria itself, that's how the Bria becomes Mukhsha, that it could taka be Mamala, this tafkid of being a Dirib Tachtenim. The Nisava is inside the Bria itself. That's how the Rebbe explains it by Riches in Bosi Legani Tafshin Lamed Aleph. But I'll call upon him, what came out from, what was the question we left with last time? How are we translating now the Medrash? Ike Shchina betachtenim hoisa. The Ike Shchina means this level lifnei tzimtzum, and betachtenim hoisa, it was down here. And how do we just explain that it means it was down here? That the world was mukhsha for this level of Ike Shchina, but not that it was down here b'poil. Now how does that fit with the simple translation of the words of the Medrash? Ike Shchina betachtenim hoisa. It doesn't say in the Medrash, Hachshara le'ike Shchina betachtenim hoisa. It says this level, which is Ike Shchina, was down here. And what are we saying now? That Rebbe explained it's only was mukhsha to be down here. And the Rebbe brings down many times this lashon from Ete brings down. There was only mukhsha. This was a question we left off last week. So, any suggestions?
Maybe it was down here, but it wasn't Begilui.
So everything was down here, not Begilui. The whole Vota Mukhsha means that it wasn't down here. It just means that the Nisava became part of the Bria, just like the Koyach HaTainug is in the foot. But the foot can be Nisrachiv if he gets a Basura Teva, Shmur Teva D'Dashan Etzem. So his foot can grow. So the foot is Mukhsha to feel the Tainug. It's Mukhsha to grow when it gets Tainug. So the world was Mukhsha to receive Giluim. Why? Because the Nisava was in the Bria. But the Shechina itself, the Ike Shechina itself, is a Madrega Lifnei Tzimtzum, and that wasn't down here. How does that fit with the Medrash? The Medrash says the Ike Shechina was down here. The simple answer to this is that we're going to have to be machalek between the Pshat of the Medrash and the Hisof of Teres Achsidus. We can't mix up the two. There's two things going on. If you're going to say that Ike Shechina is referring only to the Hachshor of Ike Shechina, but not there's something called Ike Shechina down here, it's only Mukhsha that it can receive it, so what does it mean that when he did a Chet, the Ike Shechina was nistalik? To where? To the first Rakia, to the second Rakia, and so on. What's the Hachshora of Olam Hazeh HaTachton to become a Dira doing in the Rakia? What's the Shaykhus over there? How can you say it was nistalik? What does it mean it was nistalik to a higher level? It's not a chefta that can be moved from one level to the next. If it's only a hachshara, hachshara means it's like saying the hachshara of the field to grow has now been moved up to somewhere else. Either the field is mukhsha or it isn't mukhsha, but you can't take the hachshara out of it and move it to something else that's nothing to do with the field. So obviously when we're talking about the aliyah of the Shechina or the hamshach of the Shechina that was in Olam Hazeh and it was nisal l'mayla and then it came down again, this is not talking about the Hachshara, this is not talking about the Ike Shechina Al-Pi Chassidus. First we have to take the Medrash Kipshute. What's the Medrash talking about before this minor? The Shechina was down here, not the Ike Shechina. How do we translate Ike Shechina according to Pshat? Ike Shechina according to Pshat means the Ike Mokim of the Shechina. Whatever Shechina you're going to talk about, Stam Shechina, let's talk about Stam Shechina. The Stam Shechina was down here Kipshute. There was a Shechina, just like you have a minyan, there's a Shechina over here, and then as soon as the minyan goes away, the Shechina is nistalik and goes back to wherever it came from, a different level. So the same thing, Olam Hazeh was Olam Al Milui Nivra, the place was okay, that was before the Chet, and the Shechina was down here. When he did a Chet, he was Masalik the Shechina. The Shechina says, I don't want to be in Olam Hazeh anymore, I'll go back to the Rakia Ha'alef. There was another Chet, he went up to Rakia Base, and so on and so forth. That's the Shechina Stam.
And what was the Avodah of admonition?
To be Moisif into the Shechina that's here, to be Moisif Teisvus Eiris. La'avda l'sham. A higher than Shechina Stam. Now, the fact that the Shechina was here, Begolui, as it was before the Chet, was also a Hachshara to more than the Stam Shechina. So the word Hachshara is referring to that highest level of the Ike Shechina. First there's a Medrash Kipshuta, the Shechina was down here, and through the Chet it went up, and through the Avodah of Tzadikim it came back down again. That's Shechina Stam. But negel the Hisof of Teres Achsidus. But it explains the Ikar Shchina doesn't just mean the Ikar Mokim Hashchina. It's referring to a level of Lifnei HaTzimtzum. On that we say it was only Mukhsha to the Ikar Shchina. Let me give you a mashal that would be a simple way of understanding this. Let's give a mashal of a Nefesh HaAdam, which is Shechenes of Mislabeshes in the Guf. So we'll call his Nefesh Ruach Neshama, which is Mislabesh in the Guf, we'll call that Shchina, because that's Shechen inside the Guf. Whereas the Madriga of, let's say, Chai Yichido, the Etzem HaNefesh, would be called the Ikar of the Shchina. The Ikar and the Etzem of the Neshama. Right. Now, his Guf is Mukhsha, because it's a Yiddish Guf, so it's Mukhsha to have the Hisgalus of Yechidish B'Nefesh, of Etzem HaNefesh. But B'mei Devar Ma'amurim that you can have, that the Guf is Mukhsha to be Mekabel the Hisgalus of Etzem HaNefesh, when he's a live Guf. That means when his nefesh is inside the guf, and he's a guf chai, a Yiddish guf, with Yiddish nefesh inside, it's automatically, with the fact that the nefesh is there, it's mukhsha to receive also the Yechidish nefesh. But if he hasn't got a nefesh inside his guf, that means it's a guf without a nefesh, so then how are you going to be mamshech the etzem hanashama inside the guf? Etzem hanashama can't go into a guf which is not alive. Al derech zeh, when you're going to have these galas of Ikar Shchina, when you have Shechina Stam in the world, then you're Mukhsha, then the world is Mukhsha also to the Ikar Shechina. But if you wouldn't have the regular Shechina in the world, it's not Mukhsha for the Ikar Shechina. So the Medrash is dealing with the Shechina Stam, the Madrega, which is Shechenes and Mislabeshes. It was in the world, then it went away, then it came back. The Chassidus is dealing with the Etzem, with the Madrega of Ikar Shechina, the Sheirish of the Shechina, the Sheirish Harishon Ein Sof. Once you have the Shechina down here, it was also at the same time, before the Chet, since the Shechina was down here, the Neshama was in the Guf. So it was Moksha also to something higher. To what? To the Ikar Shechina, which is Lifnei HaTzimtzum.
Doesn't it say the Ikar Shechina with the family?
So according to the Pshat in Medish, Ikar Shechina means the Ikar Mokim HaShechina. According to Chassidus, Ikar Shechina is going on the level of Ikar Shechina. And that we say, the Rebbe explains this, it was only Moksha to the Ikar Shechina. But the Pshat in Medrash remains as it was before we learned the Maimon. That means that the Shechina Stam was in the world.
So okay, the Ikar Shechina was, I mean, when we say Ikar Shechina, we're saying that we use the terminology that it was Mukhsha.
Beneged to the Ikar up Chassidus. But in Pshat in Medrash, there was a real Shechina down here, Kipshute. It was just the regular level of Shechina.
So there's no flow to the Nistalka according to Chassidus?
What's that?
The Hemshech of the Medrash, which deals with the Nistalka Shechina, doesn't apply according to the Taich of the Shechina.
It does. If you look in Lamadal, he says, it works automatically. Just like we said before, if you take the nefesh out of the guf is no longer alive. So it's no longer mukhsha also. Not only it doesn't have the nefesh, it's not mukhsha automatically to the etzema nefesh. If you don't have the regular nefesh, how can you have the etzema nefesh? So by taking the nefesh outside the guf, you're doing two things in one shot. You're taking the nefesh out, and automatically you're taking out the hachshara of the guf to receive the yechida, the etzema nefesh. The same thing, once you take the shechina out of the world, it's no longer mukhsha for the ikar shechina. Once you bring the shechina back in, not only you bring the shechina, which is a gilui, back in, you're automatically being mukhsha to more than just plain shechina, you're also being mukhsha to all the other levels. There's one other point which I wanted to mention, Beneged to Sifalaf, and then maybe we'll skip to Perik Dalet, because that's where a lot of problems arise. One other point in Perik Aleph which is interesting is when the Rebbe discusses the level of Shechina Stam, he brings the Tzemach Tzedek. But the Tzemach Tzedek says that which level of Shechina are we referring to? We're referring to Malchus Datzilus. Says the Tzemach Tzedek, we're referring to Malchus Datzilus, the way it goes down and becomes Atik L'Elam Habriya. Anybody looked up the Tzemach Tzedek? Well, the Rebbe is Mitzayin, it's a Maimeh in Kutetayr, it's a Hagor in Kutetayr, Birish L'Shreira Ani. So in the Kutetayr She'ashirim, there is a pasuk Shreira Ani, and there it talks about the level of Malchus Datzilus, and it's called Shechina. And the Tzemach Tzedek brings down, at this point, that when you call Malchus Shechina, only when it's actually Shechenes B'Poil. That means it's come out from Atzilus and been Shechen in Elam Habriya. Fine. But there's an interesting thing that the Rebbe seems to delete. The same Tzemach Tzedek, a few lines later, says that actually when Malchus is still in Atzilus, it could also be called B'Shem Shechina. And the Rebbe doesn't bring that in. Now, the here we're dealing with Shechina and Sheirish of Shechina and Sheirish this Sheirish. So if here you're bringing Sharashim for the Shechina, surely you should have mentioned the closest one. What's the closest to Malchus the way it comes down into Elam Habriya? The first one you should have mentioned is also Malchus. Before it comes down, what would be a mashal for that? Malchus the way it comes down to Elam Habriya or the way it's before Elam Habriya? There's a mashal which is brought down in Chassidus. What's the inyan of Malchus in Nefesh HaAdam? Right, Nefesh HaAdam, we know that Malchus is the inyan of Koyach HaDibur, the inyan of Dibur. Malchus is called Olam HaDibur. Or like we say in Pasach Leo, Malchus Peh, Torah Shabal Peh. So Malchus is Dibur. Now in Dibur there's two levels. There's Dibur when you're actually speaking, and there's before you speak. So Dibur when you're speaking, that would be called Shechina B'Poel. You're actually speaking to somebody else. You're going down from Atzilus. Atzilus is speaking to Olam Habriya. That would be Shechina B'Poel. But before Malchus speaks, he has the koyach to speak. Does he need to have that koyach for himself? Or is also the koyach to speak part of something that he needs for the zulas, for somebody else? A person for himself doesn't need to be able to speak. I mean, there is a mile of speaking, it helps for the person himself, but that's als mitzad the mile of zulas. The inyan of dibur is to a zulas. So the koyach hadibur, even before it's actually speaking b'poel, what is the koyach hadibur? It's one of his koyachas, it's his malchus, but it's for speaking to another person. So the koyach hadibur is also for the zulas. It's just before he's actually doing the b'poel. So al derech their malchus is called Shechina. Shechina b'poel is when it goes down, says it's Tzemach Tzedek, but even beforehand when malchus is still in Atzilus, it's like the koyach hadibur before he actually spoke. That's also called Shechina. So the Tzemach Tzedek is mechadash a sheirish to Shechina even in Atzilus. The malchus even before it went down is called Shechina. This the Rebbe doesn't bring down. This should be an obvious question when you learn Ketitei Shiurim. It seems to be that the Rebbe is missing out this most obvious sheirish of Shechina. The simple answer for that is that's not called a sheirish of Shechina. Malchus of Atzilus is not called a sheirish of Shechina, it is the Shechina itself. It's just like a child before he's born. Bim'ei imoi. Is he a sheirish to the child that's born, or he is the child? He is the child. It's just here he's unborn yet, and now he's born. So Malchus of Atzilus is not a separate, it's not a sheirish to Shechina. He is the Shechina. The way he is in Atzilus is before he actually went down, and then he comes down and becomes a Shechina to Atik Leina Mabriya. But it's not a sheirish. That's why it's not necessary to bring it down. And that's actually brought down if you look. It's called, the Tzemach Tzedek is only mechadish that you can call it Shechina even before it came down. Just like you can call the koyach hadibur dibur even before he actually speaks. We call it the koyach hadibur even though he's not speaking yet. But he's not saying it's a sheirish to Shechina, it is the Shechina itself. The Shechina before it actually did its ma'aseh b'poel going down, it's beforehand. And that's brought down also in Maimorim on the pasuk Hadassah hi Esther. Hadassah and Esther is the same person. Hadassah is Esther. It's also going on Malchus, and the Haggasha is Hadassah hi Esther. The Malchus in Atzilus is the Malchus that goes down to Elam Habriya. Esther Meloshin Hester, when it goes down to Elam Habriya, becomes the Hester, becomes the Hel, and the Hester is the same Hadassah, it's the same Malchus. It's just here it's going down into a Hester. So the same thing. That's why it's not necessary to bring it down. Anyway, I wanted to skip over to Sif to Perik Dalet. Perik base is more or less straightforward, right? It's more the union in Avodah, the Inyan of Avodah, and then again Perik Gimel is also Kol Hashvim Chavivim. I think there's a lot to talk about, but it's at the time we'll go straight to the difficult part, which is Perik Dalet. There's more to Perik Aleph as well, but there's lack of time. We'll do Perik Dalet now. So in Perik Dalet, the Rebbe brings down the whole Inyan of Dira B'Tachtonim, which is a very broad subject, but there's a few chidushim here, and the whole subject of Dira B'Tachtonim, dafka in this Maimah, which you won't find kinira anywhere else, or Akapona not in the Friedeke Rabbeim. And that is, the Rebbe starts explaining the Inyan of the Rebbe's Makasha, the two Midrashim. the medrash that says the Ika Shechina B'Tachtenim Hoysa and the medrash that says Nisava Kadosh Baruch Hu B'Tachtenim go hand in hand. In other words, the reason why the Shechina Taka was here at the beginning of the Bria, why was that Taka? Because the Tachlis is down here. And this is where the Rebbe goes into launches into the whole sugi of Dira B'Tachtenim. What does it mean that the Tachlis HaKavana is Dira B'Tachtenim? This is spoke about, those who were here last year will remember a lot of the points. That the Alter Rebbe in Tanya is be'emesim being mechadish, a very big chiddush, which he doesn't really say clearly in any of the midrashim. If you learn Perek Lamed Vov, it says, brings down from the beginning of Perek Lamed Vov, the Tachlis of Bria Selim Hazer is Dira B'Tachtenim. Now you all remember Perek Lamed Vov. So let me just read out a line. 2 lines. The first line, and then on the same page, a few lines down. Perek Lamed Vov begins, okay, it's straightforward. Then the Alter Rebbe says, what's Tachtenim mean? So experience is Milo Mata, there's Gilui and Simpson, higher Olamas have more oil, as you go down there's less oil, so now we have the Inyan of Milo Mata. Gabbat Hevish, there's no such thing, but Mitzad Giluim, the Olamas, there comes an Inyan of Milo Mata. Then the Alter Rebbe continues, towards the end of page 90, the Alter Rebbe continues, V'hinei starts a new subject. V'hinei ta'achlis ishtalshlis ha'olim sviras madrega l'madrega eine b'shtil ha'olim esilyonim ha'il v'lahem yiridim ha'ipana v'isbarach. You know the tachlis is not olim esilyonim, and I'll prove it to you. Because ha'il v'lahem yiridim, because they are yiridim. Before we get into the pshat, what the yirida is, what is the Alter Rebbe saying? He just said right at the beginning of the period, that what is the tachlis of olim hazeh? Dira b'tachtenim. Then he says, V'hinei, starts again. V'hinei, I'm going to prove to you that Tachlis is not Olam Esilyonim. Dafka Olam Hazeh. Didn't you just bring me a medrash that says that clearly? That the Tachlis is Dira B'Tachtenim? What's the V'hinei, the second V'hinei? And how can you prove such a thing? If you're going to prove to me why the Kavan is Dira B'Tachtenim, then we've lost the whole musig of Nisava. The whole vort of Nisava Kadosh Baruch Hu is brought down the famous vort that the Alter Rebbe said in Tafkuf Samach Dimel. That he said of Atayvis King Kasha. You want to know why they wish to want to do it? There's nothing to ask. There's no question. Why is there no question? Because Nisava is bad smusa. And not smusa. It's higher than Tam Vadas. It's not that you can't. That if you ask a question, we don't know the answer. There is no answer. It's higher than answer. It's Nisava. So therefore, the whole Dira B'Tachtenim is something that doesn't have to make sense. If that's the case, what's V'hinei? I'm now going to prove to you that Kavon is not Olam Esilyonim. Ha'il v'lehem yidim eipanu v'isbarach. What are you proving to me? Ha'il is a lashon of Eichacha Sichlis. I'm going to prove to you that Kavon is not Olam Esilyonim. You know why? Ha'il v'lehem yidim eipanu v'isbarach. We know this from the Medrash. Nisava Kadosh Baruch Hu. What are you telling me now? And it's in the same page. The answer is there's 2 different V'hinei, or 2 different subjects going on at the same time in the same period. Let's look at the lashon the Alter Rebbe is mighty from the Medrash. Mudar zeis maimer azal shetachlis brias olam hazeh. The Medrash is only telling you what the bria of olam hazeh is. Shenisav Kadosh Baruch Hu L'Tachtenim. Did he tell you in the Medrash what the kavana is in brias olam atzilus, or higher than atzilus? Toyu, Akudim. Does the Medrash tell us that? The Medrash is not discussing that. If you want to know what the tachlis of this world is Dira B'Tachtenim. Maybe you'll come up with a svara and say, I understand I've got to make a Dira B'Tachtenim in this world. What's going to happen after this world? We've done this world. We're finished. Now what? Maybe now there's a Kavon and Olam Esilyonim. Maybe the whole Dira B'Tachtenim is a basis for something higher in Olam Esilyonim. And wouldn't that make sense? Who holds like that? Taka, who, Api Svara, who holds like that?
Snagid.
No.
Arizal, no?
What?
Who holds that the Tachlis is Olam Esilyonim?
Rambam.
The Rambam. The Rambam says that after we finish the Tchias HaMeisim, we've got to go back upstairs to deal with upstairs. Whether it's schar, it's a bigger schar, so maybe there's no avodah. He says it's schar, okay. But it would make sense that this Olam Hazeh is the foot of Seder Ishtalshus, the last madrega. Tachn shein tachn lamata mimenu. So who's the foot for? The foot for the head, or the head is for the foot? The foot is for the head. So I would think Elam Hazeh, which is the lowest madrega, it's like when you build a building, you need to have a solid yisoid, a solid foundation. Once you have the foundation, you can build on top of that. So maybe Elam Hazeh is like a foundation that when you fix up this world, then it will affect Elam Esolyonim. Maybe there's such a svara. So Elam Hazeh Tachten is not the tachlis hatachlis of everything. Tachlis kol hatachlesim. Elam Hazeh is a stepping stone for something else. Maybe.
It's like it's in the Rabbi Rashab brings a Maila.
In Elam Esolyonim.
The fact that the Elam Esolyonim have to bring to Elam Hazeh Tachten shows in the Maila in themselves.
When they are mashlim the kavanah,
Right.
that's something else. That's once we establish that the kavanah is taka down here, then when they are mashlim, when they help for the tachlis, then they receive an aliyah.
It's not happening now, I think.
Okay, I have to see what you're talking about with you. But al kaponim, the seder is that the tachlis is for the elin, not the other way around. The feet help the head, not the head help the feet. So I would think that Elam Hazeh is a tachlis for itself. Yes, Dirib Tachtenim is a tachlis for this world. But then after that, we're going to go back upstairs and finish off something up there. Or maybe we don't have to finish anything up. Automatically, when you finish this world, it will strengthen the whole binyan. Says the Alter Rebbe, V'hinei, I'm going to prove to you that it's not like that. That this, what the Medrash says, that Tachlis B'ris Elam Hazeh is Dirib Tachtenim, is also the Tachlis of all the Seder Shtalshlis. There is no other Tachlis in Elam Esolyonim for themselves. What's the proof? Show me a medrash. For this, there's no medrash, because the medrash is only talking about Elam Hazeh. On that, it says Nisava. On that, there's Takano Hezbollah. The medrash tells us Torah was megala to us through Chachamenu Zal that it says that the tachlis of Elam Hazeh is Dirib Tachtenim. That's what the medrash was megala to us. But the kavanah of Elam Esolyonim, that the medrash didn't tell us. So maybe there's a kavanah up there. Says Alter Rebbe, I'm going to prove to you there's no kavanah up there. What's the proof? Hoil v'lahem yiridim oipanav yisporach. Because Elam Esolyonim, Atzilus and higher, all these Elamis are Yerida. They're Yerida. What does it mean they're Yerida? So now we have to go to the next part. So what does it mean to Elam Esolyonim? What does it mean Atzilus is a Yerida? Before we get to what the Yerida is, by saying this, he's proving that you can't say the Kavanah is Atzilus. Atzilus doesn't have its own Kavanah. So therefore we come back to the Kavanah, which is Elam Hazeh. In other words, the Chiddush of Perek Lamed Vav, which is what the Rebbe is being maddish in this part of the Maimah, is that this, what we say the Kavanah is Dirib Tachtenim, is not just the Kavanah of this world, it's the Kavanah of whole Seder Shtalshlis. That's the Taish Tachlis is Shtalshlis or Eilemus V'Yiridasa. The Tachlis of all the Eilemus is in the end for this world. That's B'negei the Pshat and Tanya. Now, what does it mean, Taka, when he says that Hoil V'Lehem Yiridim Oipanav Yisrael? What does it mean? What's that? You know why the Kavanah is not Atzilus? Because they're Yirida. So I'm going to leave you with some more homework. If Atzilus is a Yerida, we're Kama V'Kama Pa'am a Yerida, aren't we? So what does it mean? You can't say Atzilus. Atzilus is a Yerida. We used to speak about Atzilus like, you've got to remember, the Alter Rebbe, when he wrote Atzilus, he couldn't finish off the word. He started trembling in the middle. So we're from Der Shvi, we talk about Atzilus. Atzilus, Elam Hazeh, do. If Atzilus is a Yerida, we're Kama V'Kama Pa'am a Yerida. How can you say the Kavanah is not there? It's down here. What does it mean, a Yerida?
Also,